Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Changing Tides podcast. In each episode, we invite guests to have honest conversations about their mental health journeys with the goal of destigmatizing mental health within the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Due to the nature of the podcast, we'll be discussing a variety of mental health topics and possibly triggering experiences. While we and the majority of our guests are not trained professionals, we encourage you to practice self-care while listening and seek professional guidance if you or a loved one is in need of support. With that said, let's start the episode.
Hi, my name is Sam, and I would describe my mental health journey as fluid and constantly changing.
Hi, my name is Aussie, and I would describe my mental health journey as non-linear.
Hello and welcome to the Changing Tides podcast. I am your host, Matthew Yonemura. Thank you for tuning into this episode. I have noticed that we have gotten a few more reviews and ratings on podcast platforms, and I usually save this for the end. But if you enjoy this podcast and you would like to support us, you could give us a rating or review on the podcast platform that you're listening to this episode on. We have a very special guest, or two very special guests on this episode, and we have been following them from the Changing Tides accounts kind of from afar for a while now, and it's been so cool to see how they have utilized their platforms, which we talked about in this episode. But it was such a great conversation with these two, and I don't know what else to say because I think we cover so much. I don't even know what direction to take this. So I'm not even going to talk any further other than to introduce them. Before I get into that interview, though, I do want to share a quick content warning that we do discuss domestic abuse and a quick mention of suicide and suicidal ideations. So just be conscious of that if you continue to listen to this episode, and take care of yourself as you proceed. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the two guests of this episode, Sam and Aussie. So, Sam and Aussie, otherwise known as Saussie, thank you both for being on our podcast. We only had one meeting before this, but I have loved that interaction, and I'm really excited to talk with you both now. Our Changing Tides, like social media, we've been following you both for some time now, and it's been really cool to see how, you intersperse so much of kind of just caring for your fellow person. And I didn't even know, like, I learned so much about just both of you by researching for this podcast. But as far as I knew before this, it was just you both using your platform to share about caring about your fellow person. But I think, just to kind of go back, because I'm jumping ahead because I'm excited to talk to you both, but I think just to make it easier, I'd like to first start by why you described your mental health journeys as such. And Aussie, I think we'll start with you. Why would you just say it was non-linear?
Because it's a journey, and it's a journey that I think we as human beings, we do to the end of our time. And it's your growth, and so you're always evolving and always learning and always changing and gaining perspective. So thinking that I had done the work in my late 20s, thinking that I had put some of the stuff from my childhood behind and healed some things, and then having it pop up and in my relationship with Sam, that was so much deeper, and I hadn't even, make the connections before. So it's almost, it's not a straight, A to Z. It's going to be a non-linear journey where you're kind of like a spiral. You're going to have to just keep going back over and over again. So that's why I would describe it that way. As you're changing and evolving, things come up, and when you're ready to heal those certain things too, things will come up. So
Yeah, I totally get that. And I mean, the answers that I get to that question are usually pretty similar. It has to do with the non-linear, or it's a bumpy road, or it's twists and turns, and I think it's a similar answer, but everyone's approach is a little bit different, which I think is so unique about what mental health is. But Sam, similar, you had a similar response that it's ongoing and it's a journey. So why did you describe it the way that you did?
I think I did because, well, first, Aussie and I have very different mental health journeys. Whereas for me, I didn't really know what that was until a lot more recently. And I was actually more resistant to traditional therapy up until not too long ago. And my mental health journey actually started more with my spiritual journey and understanding my spirituality. And then that actually opened me up to my mental health journey through traditional therapy and then blending the two together. So I think for myself, it's also been a matter of just dropping expectations. Like I might think I'm working on something that's relationship related, and then all of a sudden I'm like diving into something relating to family or, like a past relationship, or I'm just constantly discovering, what it is that I'm even healing or working through. So I used changing and fluid because it's not even necessarily about what I'm setting my intention on healing necessarily. It's literally whatever's coming up, and I'm just kind of flowing with it and discovering new parts about myself. And yeah, it's been really interesting.
Yeah. Can I add something there?
Yeah.
When we started having conflict, as you normally do after the honeymoon stage kind of disappears, I suggested we go to therapy, to couples therapy and work things out, because to me, it was just more communication stuff and very little, not hard to solve situations. And I know Sam was resistant to that. And I even was wondering, is this the right person for me if she's resistant to mental health? And so there was some doubts, and that was prior to filming the show. So even suggesting a communication practitioner, like hiring someone like that to help us with communication, she was resistant to that. So I wasn't sure if this was going to be the person that I could work things out with if they're resistant, but being patient with it, and I think you have to have a gut feel, like how they, see, you kind of like have to see how they're going to respond and to these things. And I was seeing in our conflict, there was times when she would go away and think about things and kind of work on it, and we would resolve it. It would take longer, but we would resolve it down the line. But that was another reason why I thought going on the show might have helped, but not knowing what reality TV was. So
Yes, and we will talk about that. But before that, there's a lot of things that you both touched on, and something that you both did touch on is the past. Your either past relationships or prior traumas or just prior experiences. So I think you kind of discuss those things in therapy or with couples or whatever it is. You kind of start to discuss that, but and that all plays into your mental health journey. But when would you say you were conscious of your mental health journey beginning? Because you could reflect on that in hindsight, but when would you say you were really conscious of your mental health journey beginning?
I personally think it's when COVID happened,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in such a busy lifestyle and constantly just pushing aside burnout, not really having the time and space to even process some of these things or these feelings or these emotions that I was experiencing. And so I feel like a lot of people kind of went through somewhat of an awakening during that time, because everybody kind of just stopped for the first time,
Right.
and we had that space. And so for me, I really feel it was almost like that forcing of needing to stop that allowed me to start reflecting more. I was connecting with people virtually at the time, and through that was learning more about my own self and putting my experiences into a different context. And then, meeting more spiritually aligned people, I was able to explore that side of myself. The queer community, I was able to kind of open up in that way as well. And then eventually, my partnership with Aussie and being able to kind of explore that in a partnership. And yeah, so that was like my opening up. I think that I was started to become aware of things being so much deeper than they were before.
For me, I would have to say, I mean, it started when I left my home when I was 19 or so, just when I came out, and it wasn't a good experience. So I left. But it really, I would say I didn't really kind of knew what it really was, because you go to talk to a therapist. My first therapist was at university, because it affected my grades. And just talking to her, it just felt kind of hollow. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just expressing, but I wasn't really like in touch with who I was or what was happening, even acknowledging what really happened. So didn't really know anything from anything. So it was just more of a mechanical process. But I would say it was when I moved to the States for work, when there was issues, with my mom and my dad, and there was a whole guilt tripping, obviously. And obviously my mom's safety was another issue. So it was just a lot of like, holy shit, like I took it on myself, obviously, but I was worried about my mom. I was, just if I leave, if I'm on another side of the world, who's going to take care of her? Like, is she going to be okay? Even though my brothers are there, even though she's an adult. So I couldn't even sleep for like months. I was on sleeping pills. And I went to see a therapist before I left Australia. And she was, coaching me through it and saying, and I still, like, she said to me, she goes, your mom's an adult and she can make choices of her own. Up to this point, she's been making choices of her own. You can't take that on for her. You got to do what you've got to do. Even though I heard those words, it didn't really seep in like till years later. I still felt the guilt. I still felt the shame of being a bad daughter, like abandoning my mom when she needs help. Like, but what can I do? I've tried everything in my power to help her remove her from the situation that she wanted to be away from, but she still went back to it. So there was all layers of shame and guilt. So I didn't process any of that till years later in my first relationship when I moved to the States.
Do you mind sharing what you're talking about with your family? And
yeah, and this is another kind of cycle breaker that I'm doing right now, because in my culture and our culture, you don't speak about these issues. And there's domestic violence, abuse in the home, psychological, emotional, mental. And, speaking your truth in that system is not allowed. It's bringing shame. So what I'm doing right now is going to, my mom's probably going to respond as, oh, you bring shame to my family, to our family by speaking up, which she has done before, So, but these things have to be said because they continue. And it's not, there was a lot of forgiving, that I've got to get to with my dad, but there is a lot of processing still to do there, and I want to get there, but I'm not there yet. But there is there is just dysfunction in the household, even though on the exterior, all the kids are doing well, like educationally, all of academically, all of those things, because that's all they cared about. And my dad being an absent dad, absent husband, abusive, but at the same time, he didn't have the support system moving from a country, where he had a business, all of the, doctor, and then migrating to Australia and not having the support system,
Yeah.
and not even working for anyone in his entire life. He was always a boss. So all of those things, and feeling less than, and not knowing how to ask for help, perpetrated that. So there is there is there is no blame. It's like it's a whole system of things that made this situation happen. And I can see, looking back, even with his parents, my granddad, his dad passed away when he was young, and he went to Catholic boarding school as and his mom is pretty absent too, right? So he had some of the stories I would hear him and my uncle talk about in the Catholic school system, like eating onions because they were starving, getting beaten up. So there was a lot of stuff that he went through, and he hasn't processed any of that. He's just acting out in the way that he knows how, and not having a male figure in his life, and no discipline from his mom. So yeah, so that's the kind of, I look back and I can see, and there's no blame, but what I know is we've got to talk about these things. We've got to bring awareness to these things, because it just gets passed down. And I remember growing up, saying to myself, I would not, if I was a parent, I wouldn't do the opposite of everything that they did, because it's the invisible wounds
Right.
that I am experiencing in, as in my 40s, and that's what I wanted to show on the experience, on the reality TV show, is this is what happens, this is how it perpetrates, and this is how it shows up in your adult relationships.
Yeah, totally. Something that strikes me about both of your stories is that you're both very strong. I mean, you put yourself out there on TV, for one. I mean, that takes a lot of courage, but also the way you continue to advocate for others and advocate for yourselves. I think to do that with your platform takes a lot of strength. And then, just in our discussion here, I mean, obviously, I think people hear the strength there. I mean, I know you have one another, but one thing you touched on about the cultural side of what we don't talk about, I'm wondering about what other sense of community has helped you be so strong. Are there aspects of your culture, or aspects of being part of the queer community? Are there anything that helps to encourage you both to have this strength that you do have?
Yeah. Since there was such a wide gap between the filming and when the show actually came out, we had about a good year and a half that at the time we didn't know when it was actually going to come out, but after we came back from filming, we kind of made I don't want to call it a commitment, but we kind of knew that it was going to be harder and harder once the show came out to know which relationships might be authentic, or people approaching us, or organizations. And it would be harder to distinguish between, who might be trying to take advantage versus who genuinely wanted to connect with us and, were aligned with our mission. And so we actually attended a lot of events, virtually and in person, in that in-between time, so that we could actually kind of see what organizations were like, and who might be a little bit more dismissive of us before we're in the spotlight versus others. And so we were able to kind of have a lot of community members that we developed relationships with in the in-between time, and they kind of helped become our support system too once everything came out, and we were kind of put under all of this, just the spotlight, but a really bright one all at once. And they were really grounding for us. So it was really that cultivating of the community before.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been really, really helpful.
Yeah, I would say for me, being queer, it has been it gave me a chosen family, really. It gave me a group that was not accepted. And so there was this camaraderie within the group and shared resources, support. I got a lot of my love from my chosen family rather than my own family, so that was my strength. And also coming from a community where you are the outcast, you are marginalized, you are oppressed. That's a group of really strong people living out loud who they really are in a world that doesn't accept them. So you gain strength from that energy and that self-acceptance through them. And through that's why I really appreciate those who come before us, those who fought in the 60s to gain rights, who walked those paths and battled out out with the authorities to have our human rights supported, just to be ourselves. So I just am so blessed. The community that I had support gave me support in my mental health journey, because we as a community have a lot of mental health issues because of the unacceptance that we received as kids. So there's a shared kind of challenge and a shared healing that happens when we support each other.
I think even how we met during the pandemic was online in a LGBT women's group, and it was very intergenerational. And so during that time too, we had so many conversations with people spanning, I was one of the youngest, all the way to the oldest being in her early 80s. And so we were like just all of the storytelling, and that kind of helped ground us as well, or at least that's how I felt, is like being able to hear these stories. We were getting to hear them firsthand and getting to share and just connect with all different types of people. And yeah, that just kind of came through again as we were like getting kind of blasted into this spotlight. We like had these people that knew us before everything, and they could help us kind of come back to our center and not get lost in it all.
Yeah, I one thing, so we at Changing Tides have our CT Stream initiative. It's free therapy for young individuals between 16 and 29 years old. And we ask, we have a network of therapists that's really great, but one thing we ask them is what their priorities are. What kind of therapist are you looking for? And it's been a pattern that some of the LGBTQ plus individuals who come to us seeking therapy, they want a therapist who comes from a queer background or identifies as queer in some way, because, that's one of the factors of, relatability, along with, race, ethnicity. Like, that's a big part of what we're seeing, what makes a good therapist match for some folks. I mean, sometimes it's someone who wants someone the exact opposite from them just because, they want to hear a totally different perspective. But yeah.
I've wanted the opposite. Like I couldn't have an Asian therapist. Like I had this block, and I actually had an Asian therapist before the show. And I noticed myself not being able to share a lot of things. And I was like, things that my parents would not allow, like, me to do, or like I couldn't share certain things. So I noticed that. But that was because another therapist was like, oh, you have a block with Asian therapists. Maybe you should look into that. Maybe you should get an Asian therapist. And I did, but I was like, okay, it's not working, because I should be able to share everything with them, But yeah, that was an older generation, or like very traditional, also an immigrant. So I don't know. I've not tried.
Well, yeah, it's different for everyone, and I think that's why it's encouraging for me to hear, I mean, from your experiences already, like you've expressed that you've tried different therapists. And I think I had a bad experience with a therapist when I was in high school. Then it's been a long time since I started up again until this year. So it took me a long time to try therapy again, but it's like, that's all it is. You have to find the right fit for you. It could be someone the exact opposite from you or someone of a similar background. So I think, it's good to hear different perspectives.
And
Yeah.
we were really excited to be able to do this interview with you because you are an AAPI male, and there is a whole
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
thing with mental health and men, and then with the Asian communities. And like we talk about this a lot, that intersection of all of these different identities. It's like you just have barrier after barrier sometimes, and we're not breaking through one, we might be breaking through three different ones coming
Right.
from all different angles. So it's cool to have, a different perspective for us to talk about our experiences with too.
So I think that it doesn't really directly segue into my next question, but you mentioned it a little bit earlier, about how the two of you met. If you guys could share that story.
Yeah.
It was lockdown. And I'm an extrovert. And so I was looking for community, and I was living and working out in like whoop whoop. So I had to, make connections. So it's a in-person group actually from Orange County, like a queer lesbian group. That I've gone to in person for like a couple of events, but I thought, oh, maybe, they've got a daily happy hour now, so let me just check it out online. And so that's when I met Sam.
For me, it was a lot different. The reasons that brought me to it, the specific event that drew me to it was actually on queer or lesbian relationships. And at the time, I had a partner who was not out. And so for me, I had been for years struggling with my own identity and like kind of being in this weird gray area of like coming out to certain family and close friends and even some close coworkers. But then when it came to my wider experiences or relationships or connections, I often found myself in the position that I feel like a lot of people in the LGBT community are kind of faced with at some point of their life, where it's like, do I tell this person? Do I correct them if they just assume I have a boyfriend or a husband? Or, like all these things that run through the mind. And then I'm like, oh no, I'm not being authentic. Who am I lying to about my identity? Right. And so there was actually a lot of these things that I was going through at the time, that by the time the pandemic happened, I was actually craving LGBT community because I felt like I was so cut off from it. But I had such a strong pull towards the community. It was like there was this part of me that just knew I was meant to be like in it, and not just like in it as a member or like identifying as, but I felt like I was meant to like really be in the community and do something with that. So I was like, I had this push and pull in me, and this like meetup event happened, and it's like, oh, come explore LGBT relationships.
I think they had a facilitator who was a mental health professional.
Oh, cool.
You remember?
I think so.
She was a mental health professional, and she was talking about like queer lesbian relationships. There was a term for it, limerence or something that she talked about. But yeah, it was a conscious partnership.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing your little box as you came online.
Yeah. So both of us were like not looking to meet anybody. I mean, I was still figuring out my relationship at the time. And again, it was through these stories of getting to be in all these intergenerational conversations happening that I got to have these light bulb moments of realizations of like, knowing and recognizing that there were a lot of things I wasn't happy about, but then I didn't at the time have the courage to do anything about it. Like I was kind of just stuck there. And it was a specific story that someone was sharing about being in a relationship. At the time, I think she was in her like late 50s when she was sharing, early 60s, and was talking about a 14-year relationship, I believe, that she was in, and like how that divorce happened and all of that. And that's when I was like, oh my goodness, like this is the road that I'm on right now, knowing right now that there's something missing in my life. And I could either, like do something and figure this out now, or I'm going to find out 10 years down the line. So there was a lot going on at that time, but that's kind of how our friendship initially started. And eventually, after I broke things off, then we, romance. Just kidding.
Aussie, do you have the same recounting of the story?
When I knew that she was not available, I was like, okay, friendship only, you know.
Uh-huh.
Well, I also wasn't looking at the time for anyone. But I knew I was calling in my conscious partner. And I was at a space where I was like, I don't need to be in a relationship. And I know I could feel that it was coming, but I wasn't like in a rush to get there, because I knew that the right timing would be when I'm ready and when that person is ready too. So it was in a happy place of being single and doing my own thing. But yeah, it's just
but really, Aussie liked me because I was the first person who didn't care about the accent. Because for some reason, people in the US are like obsessed with accents. And for me, I was like, whatever.
Yeah, she
How
was
funny.
the first person who I met and just had never mentioned anything about the accent. And just like I was like, oh, you're different, aren't you?
How funny. How funny.
Yeah, at the time, it was just like, do you call yourself Aussie because that is like you want to protect your identity? Or is that your name?
How funny.
I had no clue I was from Australia.
How funny. Well, I like to hear that you guys are aligned in the stories. There's no scheming from Aussie's side, It was so I think so now I want to get kind of back into the individual sides of it. So, Sam, I have to tell you, I've had my doubts about tarot. I've had my doubts about tarot in the past. But can you tell us what is tarot reading, or what is tarot as a practice?
Yeah. For myself, I feel like I do it a little bit differently. I have a strong focus on ethics and ethical readings. And so the way that I describe tarot is more of a tool. So just as an artist might use different mediums, like different pens or pencils or markers or whatever it is. There's also different tarot and oracle decks that I use as a guide. And for me, it's really something that helps kind of spark my intuition, whether it's the imagery in it or whether it's like the numbers or the certain meanings behind them, just as you would like playing cards and the different suits in them. They all kind of have their different themes to them. And so I've kind of taken it and noticed that I had a pattern in doing a lot of healing with people. And so in the first year of actually doing readings for people I had never met before, I started recognizing like how many people would cry in my sessions. Like they were actually releasing things, or I was helping them uncover things that were so buried. And it was just through literally using these cards as a way to like, again, spark my intuition, come across situations and validate them, confirm things that they already knew and they just kind of needed this other person to help tell that to them. And so it was kind of a journey that happened over time. And then bringing in mental health into it, I'm like, oh, like I see something here where we could really use this as like something to help us reflect and process things and like use it in tandem with mental health services, where now the person isn't just like, oh, this thing happened a week ago and now in this moment during my session I don't remember it, so it's not active anymore. That doesn't necessarily let us kind of fully process the situation. And so tarot in a way is like, I encourage journaling. I encourage if they want to, verbally talk about things and record it. But when appropriate, I recommend mental health professionals, or I recommend that they talk certain things through with a mental health professional. And so It's definitely not something that, especially those with religious backgrounds, are often taught that tarot utilizes like the devil or like, like negative entities. And that's absolutely not true. At least with somebody who is not doing that. I mean, not going to speak for everyone. I'm sure they're out there. But for myself, it's really all about setting the intentions of helping people to uncover their subconscious and really grow into their own empowerment, their own understanding of who they are. And then really it's that self-love journey. And so tarot is just a guide or a tool that helps in that.
Mm-hmm. Aussie, when would you say, were you always aware of tarot, or did you have to get convinced, or was one of your interests in Sam the free tarot readings? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
What, like, where were you along with the tarot part?
I've always been open to spirituality. I've seen, psychics and, to get my readings and astrology readings and things like that. So I've always been open to it. It was actually when I first met Sam, like we said during the pandemic lockdown, that we actually connected through listening to some online YouTube tarot readings together. And so she introduced me to online tarot readings. I was like, oh, I didn't know this exists.
Right.
So that's when so that's how we kind of connected more as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
Very cool. So you kind of answered my question, Sam, about mental health and tarot readings going kind of hand in hand. But I'm wondering, like, what kind of, because you mentioned how sometimes you do readings and, people get emotional because you're kind of helping people just to see from another perspective. Like, they already know, but they just need the extra person to help them see it. But I'm wondering, like, what kind of toll that might take on you emotionally when you are, if like there's some sense of empathy there, of course, you're feeling what they're feeling. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, a lot of that has to come with proper kind of protection or setting myself before. And a lot of it is also visualization for me personally. So people do it in different ways, whatever works for them. But if it's like really, really heavy, then I might even like get out sage or like some of the actual cleansing things. But most of the time, I'm able to just visualize like energetic cords that are connecting me to this person. And I just visualize myself cutting it. And so it's a kind of an intuitive thing too, that I'm like, what am I needing right now? Is it just, a nap? Do I need to drink extra water? And so kind of just being very in tune with myself and noticing if I have a shift in me that needs clearing out. So it really is setting the stage kind of beforehand, preparing myself. And the other part has been setting boundaries. So even how many I might do in a day or the time I need in between them, just to let myself have enough recovery time. So there's a few things that I do or put in place to help release the burnout that might occur if I'm not doing those self-care things.
Mm-hmm. So, Aussie, admittedly, your digital footprint was pretty minimal prior to being on your Netflix show, which made it kind of difficult for me to research more about you. But, you still have used your social media for mental health awareness, general humanitarian matters, and representation of all kinds. So, how, now that you do have this platform and you do now have a digital footprint, what has encouraged you to use your platform to represent others or to show up for others?
What has encouraged me to show up for others? I would say it is the knowledge or the knowing actually before going on the show that I was meant to go on there and meant to it was this calling, and then just getting the feedback after with either from queer community as well as the Asian community around the world, saying that I'm really grateful that you were vulnerable and I resonated with your story and it helped me feel seen and validate my experience. So I didn't know what was going to happen, obviously, the outcome of it all, but those messages and those kinds of connections make me know that it was for the right for the right reasons. And I've always wanted to not let my kind of challenges in life, my traumatic childhood, all of those things go to waste. I think, and I've always known I want to help others. So I want to use the platform for good. So that's what makes me, even though I don't like social media, I really don't, but it's what I focus on, the people that I'm helping, and getting the message out there, and doing the positive things that I want to do in the world. So yeah, using the platform for good.
One thing I found funny is on a couple of the Instagram lives that are still on Sam's feed. It always starts with Sam, and then it looks like she has to use a big comical cane to bring you into frame. I mean, it's not that extreme. It's not that extreme, but I noticed it's Sam first, and then maybe a tug on the arm.
Yeah, good call.
But Sam, you do seem a little bit more comfortable on social media, but like in a similar vein, like how about you in putting yourself out there? Like, of course, you could just be using your platform to promote, your tarot readings, but at the same time, you're using your platform to look out for others. So, in a similar vein, like what encourages you to be passionate to use your platform for others?
Yeah, I feel like I've always just been a very advocate, like humanitarian.
You're Aquarius.
Yeah, it's been very strong in me from a young age. And before I used to see it more as like I recognized I love, like tutoring or teaching or helping people in that way. And so when we were kind of given this opportunity, I'm like, it really didn't change in that way. And I like to joke that it doesn't take you more than a half second when you see either of us that we're not your typical influencer. And so like not in any way. And so really part of our journeys too are just like learning to be able to bring our authentic selves out. And even mentioning earlier how I had so many years of that stuffing of who I was, even though I knew I didn't want to have like that person as like the face to me. I'm like, that's not really me. I have so much more like fire and vibrancy in me, yet I'm like almost being forced to have this persona. And I felt so stuck that it was like once I opened the floodgates, there was no going back from there. So now it's like I'm going to stop asking to see more people in the media to represent us, because we're given this opportunity to be those people. So it's really about like, we don't have to ask anymore, and we can really help be that. And like, so we're just kind of running with it. We're just being ourselves, representing, I like to say, maybe the more people who may feel more like outcasts or that they're not represented. We were just watching the Katy Perry documentary, even though it's like 6 years old, but a lot of it was like allowing a space for people to just be weird sometimes, or like eccentric, and we don't always have to fit the mold. So with both of us, like we don't fit that mold. So
Aussie, did you happen to say that Sam is an Aquarius?
Yeah.
What sign are you?
I'm a Gemini sun. So
Okay.
yeah. But also I have two waters, so I'm like a Cancer and a Scorpio. So I like that's why the tears,
double water, double fire.
Got it. I was just curious because my partner is also an Aquarius, but I don't know the order of them. All I know is I'm a Scorpio, Gemini, Gemini.
Oh wow, you have an interesting mix.
I never know what that means, but whenever I say I'm a double Gemini, that gets a reaction. So
yeah, we have a bad rep, but like you got a Scorpio in there, so you know what I mean.
And the double air.
Yeah. This is the perfect platform. All the communicating and getting the message out in the world.
And the deepness and Scorpio, like that transformation. Like
I'll take your word. I'm told frequently these things, but then I forget. So
Yeah.
okay, so now we've been referring it to that show. Um, but I do want to ask you about the Ultimatum, which is the show that you both appeared on. And I think I just want to know, like, today, where do you stand on that whole experience?
I think you should go first.
Oh, this is actually a loaded question, but quite fun. Um, really, again, I think it comes back to trying to focus on like the opportunity of the platform that we've been given and the ability to also reach audiences that we might not really have been able to before. And whether that is like allies or Asians and non-Asians who may not really understand the Asian experience, like be like queer identities and what that might look like. I feel like we generally have been able to kind of attract a lot of people who are at least curious or are kind of seeking that more of the depth of content and not just seeing the same thing over and over again. And so I like to kind of keep as much focus around the opportunities that it's offered us, and the healing that we've had in our relationship. Although it kind of, again, just like there was a lot during and after filming. It was like there was a lot of struggle actually for us to find that balance and find that, like, still kind of trying to figure out, like, is this gonna work? Like, what is this gonna look like moving forward? So at the end, I'm still very, very appreciative for the opportunity. I also feel like this was something we were meant to do. Like, it was just, in the stars for us, and the way that everything aligned for it to happen. Yeah, I think we're kind of on the same page in terms of not wanting to, just let this opportunity go to waste. But yes, your turn.
I have an NDA that I've signed. So know that. But yeah, there is, I also have to look at the positives. Obviously, there are things that I can't talk about that I wish I could talk about, and also advocate other people who might want to go on the show for. But just do your homework. You know what a reality TV show is, because I had no idea. But it was also a calling. And so, I think maybe that was the universe's way of just like throwing me in there, because I had to go through that kind of walk through the fire in order for me to like dig deep inside myself as well. There were so many moments in that hell. In the hell. So many moments where I had to, it literally was though, because I had to go inward. And I had to really depend on myself, because I didn't have Sam. Like, we weren't allowed to talk to each other, message. I didn't have my friends and family. Like, they were, like text wise, like, communication wise. I wasn't, like, moments of being isolated where I had to depend on myself and go inward and like take out, oh, I've got to now stand up for myself. You can't reach out to my friend and say, hey, what should I do in this situation? Because that's what I was doing before. Like, I had my friend circle that would tell me, oh, that person is really not treating you well. You should do this, But I really had to depend on myself and go inward. And so I learned to stand up for myself and walk out. That was like amazing, even though it was really hard to do and come to that situation. So setting boundaries, like I learned to do that. I learned for the first time to do that on my own. So there was moments of that, and then going back to Sam and not having her support with the hell that I went through, and not realizing, what that was like for me. So depending, like, self-love, having to like love myself and knowing that I'm lovable, even if Sam is like feeling like I'm not supported by Sam, the person that's supposed to have my back is not having my back. So there was just moments that was really challenging, that forced me to pull out, my spiritual tools what I could rely on to do that. And also moments in like the changeover when I knew the epithet was going to be coming across the table, but I was shocked. I had never met anyone that would lie, like literally lie about you in front of the world. I was like, what is happening right now? So it was like in those moments of recovery and I also had to, I didn't have Sam's support that night. And so there was these like self-critical doubts, like you're not lovable. See, look, it's your fault. Everything's like you're the one, so all these self-criticism was coming up.
Right.
I had no one but myself to depend on, and I had to like dig deep. And man, it was like till 3 a.m. in the morning telling myself, yes, you're lovable. No, you're, like going back and forth, this inner conflict. But those challenging moments I'm grateful for now looking back, but it was detrimental to my mental health for sure after the filming. Being gaslit for that long and not having your partner to support you. And then it was just so much of like mental turmoil that I had to work and process after the filming, and then having the thing come out, and then the hate,
Yeah,
the backlash and hate for being so vulnerable, and you're like showing your everything honestly and everything, not pretending to be anyone on like defending myself or pretending to be anyone else like other people might have been, and then having just your you being ripped apart online, and then having to go through that, like just processing all of that, like learning again to go deeper to, now I've got to work on this other thing, like I'm caring about this stranger who only saw 1% of who I am. Right. And to like define who I am and tell me who I am, like why am I doing that? So I have to go now deep another level of healing that I've got to do. Mm-hmm. So despite the hell, I feel like it's made me stronger. It's made our relationship stronger. We went through that like challenging, like, oh my God, challenge on top of challenges, and we've come out like,
yeah, we're like, some people are still like, oh, but when's the wedding going to happen? And we're like, okay, if you can get through what we went through, that doesn't mean anything.
Right. So when does the NDA expire?
Probably
we'll have you back.
Yeah.
Isn't there an end date to the NDAs?
We'd have to, it's probably so long. Okay. I don't even know.
Well, we'll have you back. I won't pry. But, I saw the comments, on social media. One of you definitely get more positive comments than the other. So what's that like for you to see that attention, and how do you handle that? How do you handle the, Sam, maybe like, I'm not trying to cause more drama here, but like Sam is getting more reception. Yeah. And then Aussie, you're getting so much hate. Like, how does that play a role for the both of you?
It was very challenging.
It was very challenging. Yeah. But the thing was, what it made me see more of the truth of, which I can't talk about because there's an NDA. Right. That's what made me see more clearly of what I went through. Right. Because I was so trusting. I trusted my whole like trauma history. I talked to the therapist. I talked everything. So I was so trusting of myself, and that's how they treated me. Right. So that's what I saw more of. Not, Sam, you're getting so much better. Like, what it showed me was like, oh, what the hell did they do to me? Like that narrative they gave me, and all the other things that will, that put me in a good light or even in the middle, my neutral light, just not added in because it was a dramatization. Mm-hmm. So I get that it's TV and it was better than season 1, and that's like that's what you've got to do, right? Like they did a good job at keeping people watching till the end, because I'm pretty boring. Like there's stuff that we there's stuff to pick on, but it's I guess that's what I learned from it was the lens, the dramatization. That's what it showed me from what was shown.
And
Yeah.
I think for me, it was challenging in a different way too, because I was trying to, take advantage in a way of having all of the buzz at the time and like, oh, this is a great opportunity to be able to connect with people or get opportunities and things like that. But at the same time, it was like there was just so much going on that when I compare, like even just something as simple as going live, like on social media, I would feel so burnt out, like 30 minutes into a live, and I could tell my body temperature was like raising and it would get really hot and I would feel so exhausted and I would need to take a nap or like I'm just out for the rest of the day. And then more recently, I'm like, oh, it's actually like I did a whole 2 hours one day and I was fine. And so like trying to like at the time I was like, oh, we're gonna miss the opportunities and like all the buzz is gonna go away and we're gonna miss out. And so I was trying to like straddle even at like my own feelings too of like, how do I be a supportive partner and also try to be like understanding, but then not pursue things that I find to be exciting or want to go towards. And so it was a lot of just like push and pull that was very challenging to navigate. And so for me, it was also a journey of like figuring out like the clarity of it, like knowing that the right things were going to fall into place at the right time, that there was no need to like grasp at things and that everything's going to be okay. And, we're not like going to be dependent on all of these people that we don't really know. Right. And so there was a lot of learning experience, but challenging is probably an understatement.
Yeah.
What it really was, because even at the time, like it was so, especially when it was so bad for Aussie, like I was going in on there and I was the one who was trying to delete comments. And so a lot of people didn't even know that I was the one reading all of these really crappy things. And like, and so, and then even getting criticized for that of like, oh, so you're just doing all these things for Aussie and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, you don't get it though. Like, like no one should have to read this stuff.
Right.
And so yeah, like all of that, and we were just getting bombarded by so much and it was hard to really filter through it. And so now it's a lot better. A lot easier, but it's really, in the end kind of brought us a lot closer.
Yeah, I'm
Our
sure.
trust
Yeah.
in each other, our
Yeah.
support of each other, like all of that has, been so much stronger because of all of that.
Yeah.
So
I know before I was feeling like, oh, you're not supporting me. Like, you didn't really understand what I went through with that person. But through, when you were helping me through that time, like that was critical to my mental health. And let me tell you, Matthew, like I understand now how that social media backlash or that negativity can affect certain, like you hear about celebrities like, killing themselves, right? Like I can understand how they would have gone just over the edge. Like it was like a fine line. Like, and I know like I'm so grateful Sam was there. I have my circle of friends. If I didn't have that support, man, if you're like, say we broke up on the show and I didn't have that support, right? Like that is really hard stuff for someone who has my history, especially, someone who didn't have a strong sense of self, like never felt loved when they were growing up, like, that's like very weak, right? You're just trying to grow that yourself now, and having that like whole hate, oh my gosh, I can totally support like the mental health work that needs to go into people that go on these shows, like there needs to be way more support.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I saw the video of just like Aussie dancing like at like the DJ or like for the Netflix premiere party thing, and people were like, "Jeez, they need to grow up." I'm like, "What? They're just Aussie's just dancing." Like, what do you mean? And I was just like, I was mind blown at like the way people would approach it. I was just so confused. But
I know.
and I did see the comments, but I could see how all of the backlash or the reciprocal, how you guys were take all that in, how that could either drive people apart or could bring people closer together. So, I mean, you mentioned how you both were brought closer together from the experience, but how do you think you could get into more specifics of how that, like why it got you closer together?
Yeah.
It really is or was our commitment to the healing and growth process. Like, I think if I were to just give it one statement that sums it all up, it is that. Because in every challenge, it is like, okay, what is happening within me in this moment? And, in some situations where Aussie might feel like, oh, I caused this situation, or I might feel like, oh, I caused this situation. It's like, no, how did this actually end up being something that was exactly what we both needed from it in order to heal some part of ourselves or have this light bulb moment connecting it to a past experience? And so we've really been so committed to that, like self-discovery, self-awareness journey and the healing together, that we've been getting better and better at removing the blame, whether it's an external blame or like an inward blame of ourselves causing anything. And I think through that recognition, it really helps us like sit more in like the difficult feelings or the challenges and bring a different version of relationships into the media and into the spotlight. I think that's one thing that we really, really did, was we kind of showed to a level of where the media likes to portray healthy relationships as ones that are just like never have any issues or problems, or like that there's never anything to work with, and if somebody doesn't meet your standards, that just means that they're not good enough, and you're so high and mighty that you're just going to go and find somebody better, right? And so it's again even removing that part of it and like, no, we're equals here and we each have our stuff and we're going to work through our own stuff and we're going to help each other along the way too.
Yeah, I think the misconception that came out from the backlash really is that, equating trauma, someone who has trauma equals bad. You can't have a successful relationship. Someone that doesn't want to do therapy. And I've been in therapy since I moved out of my house at 19, like I'm advocate for mental health. So there's all these misconceptions about someone with trauma. I'm not saying that it's easy to be in a relationship with somebody with trauma, because I was in a relationship with somebody with trauma before, who was a mental health professional too. And it wasn't easy. But that's not to say that you can't have healthy, work towards a healthy relationship. It takes a lot of work and responsibility and commitment, but that's on you, right? It's easy to judge somebody else. And when you haven't gone through that yourself, or when there's other reasons, obviously, but yeah, that's the misconception that I saw from that big backlash. And even mental health professionals who were reviewing our show made that mistake too, even when they had been very balanced in their reviews of other, participants on these reality TV shows. When it came to that trauma, they immediately labeled it, oh, I'm the one that needs to work. Sam needs to get out. Like, so it's just so entrenched in our society. And I don't know what the answer is for that, but I'm hoping that I can be somebody that can represent, hey, it can work. It can work and it can be healthy.
And I think what it really highlighted for us, we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, was the lack of understanding of the AAPI experiences behind closed doors. And for those who did not have similar experiences, or even anyone close to them where they might kind of have an inkling to what it might look like, we know for a fact that one or both of us triggered a lot of people and their stuff. So even in us working through things together and doing this healing journey together, we know that it also brought up a lot of feelings for people who maybe didn't get the love and support from their partner or a family member or whoever it was that they were seeking that from. And so some of this backlash was really like we kind of described it as like Aussie almost being like this tangible physical thing that they could direct their,
disown
like,
parts of themselves.
yes. And so they had nowhere else to direct it, because if it's not at somebody else external to them, then it has to be at them. And then there's that whole process of really contextualizing the experience and like coming to terms with what may have happened or what we didn't receive. And so we know that a lot of it was really like we were triggering people, and I think that we still do, but it again fuels our like, okay, we got to put more of these stories out there. Like, this is part of our journey, is to help bring this level of representation and be unapologetic about it, because that's the only way we're going to help empower people who have these experiences to be more open and vulnerable about their experiences, or feeling even safer to go towards them. And so
we've had couples that we've actually talked to as well, where they've express that, oh, this is me and my partner, they had trauma, and they're a mental health therapist, mental health professional as well. So we've had like dialogue where they said this helped them, they watched that scene over again and talked about it, so it's stuff like that I feel full. My heart is full with those kinds of stories. Yeah.
So I have a couple of sillier questions, but I mean, I want to first of all thank you both for sharing your story with me, and I agree with what I think it was Sam who mentioned it earlier. We're all AAPI, but I'm a heterosexual male, and I think there's so much that we could all just learn from mental health journeys of different backgrounds, different gender identities, different AAPI backgrounds, coming from different places of the world. I think it's so good that the way that you said, your experience triggers some people. I think if some people knew that there was an AAPI podcast talking about mental health, people would be mad about that too, So I just think it's so good to have this cross dialogue, and hopefully it reaches the right people and not the people that would be mad about an AAPI podcast. But before I get to some of these sillier questions, I wanted to see if there's anything else you'd like to say that we didn't touch on yet.
I think the only thing I did tell Oz yesterday that I wanted to really share, and this is really quick, is just releasing that judgment of our experiences and deciding that they are either good or bad. Because a lot of times we're like, oh, challenging is bad. Oh, like difficult, or, feeling fears of sadness or fear or anger is bad. And that good means it's just easy and simple and flowing. But within, like, being able to release that and just like taking things as they come has really helped both of us in our healing journeys. And it's helped us not have as much fear or anxiety around exploring these different things. So as much as we can, not just within ourselves, but even within other people that are in our lives or that we experience, just like doing our best to remove the good or bad and kind of always categorizing things, because it isn't always what it is or what it may seem like from an external perspective. And so that's one of the things I wanted to share.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just wanted to add to that on my personal journey, and thank you for bringing that up, babe. That is actually what I'm working on with my spiritual journey. When I feel like, holy crap, I'm not feeling so well, I should be doing better. If I'm doing my spiritual work, I should be feeling way better. But, as someone in the mental health field, when you're doing your healing work, that stuff is coming up. So you're not going to be butterflies and rainbows all the time. Like that is some deep stuff that you've been repressing, that you didn't know was there even. So the healing journey isn't always rainbows and butterflies. It's going to have some dark moments and clouds and storms, but that non-labeling of good and bad, the emotions to be good and bad, and allowing them to be there, and asking inquisitive, questioning those feelings. Hey, what am I supposed to learn from this? And being okay with those, uncomfortable or negative feelings like anger or frustration. Those are ways that we can heal ourselves, because those are the things that we've been pushing away. We're not allowed to be this way. We're told as a child, we're not allowed to feel angry. So when that anger comes up, you feel it and you ask those questions, you're able to heal those parts and move on to, releasing that.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, that's actually something I've been working on with my therapist, is in regard to anxiety. I went into therapy looking for ways to never feel anxiety again, when really it's kind of learning about not anxiety necessarily being a bad thing, labeled as a bad thing, because sometimes anxiety is what heightens your awarenesses, and sometimes it's like in event planning. So, with Changing Tides, we host events. If I'm anxious about an event, I could go through the checklist of what are we missing? What do we need to address? Sometimes anxieties could trigger those things, but on a much more, basic level, fear. If you have fear when walking towards the Grand Canyon, that's probably a good thing, because you might want to take a step back. You might want to, fear could be a good thing. So I appreciate you both saying that, and I think that's a really great takeaway before I get into some of these sillier questions. So first one for both of you is, if you could invite 3 people to dinner, dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh my God. It's okay. I can come up with it.
I have
Okay.
some. You can go.
Okay, I'm gonna say, Maya Angelou, dead or alive, you said, right?
Yeah.
Eckhart Tolle, and Mary Magdalene.
Oh, that has been coming to me a lot, actually. So I'll be at that party too. Or invite Mary Magdalene back. But also RBG. Yeah.
So many.
And then someone else who had been coming, I'm getting a little bit more on the woo side, but someone that had been sending me a lot of messages was actually Harriet Tubman over the last year. So I think those 3, I would want to have these conversations about even just the whole idea of the Underground Railroad and having these some really cool stuff.
So Mary Magdalene, Harriet Tubman, and RBG.
There you go.
For anyone curious of why Sam and Aussie had that reaction, it's because I warned them. I told them this is the question that people struggle with.
And we forgot. We totally forgot.
It's okay.
It's so funny.
It adds to the quick fire aspect of what we do here. But
yeah.
I need to start warning people that that's the question people struggle with. So that's why there was the reaction there. I told you about this one too. I'm excited to ask about the strangest cameo requests you've gotten.
Okay, but yours is really funny.
Which one are you
The
thinking
ones
of?
with the roast.
Oh yeah. I got a roast request.
So you were requested to roast someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a people pleaser, by the way.
Yeah, as a people pleaser. That was so hard to say those mean things. It was so awful. It felt so bad.
So did they give you the material, or did you have to, or were they like, here's who I am, make fun of me, and you have to come up with it?
Yeah, so it was some of the
oh man,
but it was really random too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of them I'm just like, oh, this is it's really bad but really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you got it twice.
I did.
Yeah,
so
2 times.
from the same person?
Roasting people.
No, they were
okay.
different.
Yeah.
And I was like, you got to roast.
I was like, oh my gosh. This is the hardest thing to do, is say mean things. I hate it.
Sam, have you gotten any strange ones?
I don't think I've really gotten strange ones that I would say, but that one, since I was helping Aussie with it, I would say that works for both of us.
Got it. Has there been one big lesson that you've learned from one another?
Oh, yeah. I would have to say the biggest lesson I've learned from Sam is that I am lovable.
Mm.
The biggest lesson that I feel like I've learned is it has to literally do with the mental health journey and like I think kind of normalizing it or helping to provide that space like that has helped me just learn how to start really tuning into myself and it's okay to explore certain things.
Mm.
So the emotional depth part
Mm.
has been really helpful.
That's awesome. Okay. I don't know if you've thought about this, but if you had to go on another reality TV show, if you had to, what would you pick?
Probably nothing relating to like dating people in any way
Uh-huh.
or swapping partners.
Cooking one. Can I go on a cooking one?
Yeah,
Oh, that'd be cool.
you can do that.
Yeah.
You can.
The worst cook.
Oh yeah. I think one of the funniest one that Aussie really wanted to do was like an amazing race, and I was like,
Oh.
I don't think so. Like,
Yes. That is the
no.
yes. I
I
know.
feel like I might want to do one that's relating to like puzzles though, or like
Mm.
figuring like
The Lego one?
oh, yeah, that might be fun, but probably not. There's like Lego Masters, but sometimes
Ooh.
building Legos for like 13 hours. I don't want to do that. I just want
I
to solve some puzzles.
right. You could even do like Jeopardy or Family Feud. I would throw not those aren't
Oh,
reality
yeah.
TV, but
Yeah, that's true.
So there's some puzzling like with the Amazing Race, that's like solving things.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I've wanted to do the ones that are a little bit more like those courses that you
mm,
do. I have to be more in shape for that. Yeah, after COVID, not as much as I was before, but I think like those would be really fun where you're like running around the courses.
yeah.
Yeah, like an obstacle course. I think I would like that.
Like the floor is lava?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Cool. Okay, last but not least, where can people find you online? How can people support? Plug away.
Yeah. So our couples page, we use Keep It Saucy, not Keep It Aussie, but Keep It Saucy with the S.
Right
So
behind you
like,
in the image right
oh
behind you. Yeah.
yeah, my cousin got this for us for Christmas.
Awesome.
Yeah.
SAUSSIE.
Yeah, so Keep It Saucy is like our website, and then our Instagram handles. We have our links within our bios on all of that. So Aussie underscore has underscore FOMO. Aussie has FOMO, and then mine is conscious.altruism. And then I'm also on TikTok with Saucy Tarot, so I do more tarot content there. Yeah, I think that's the best way. All of our links are in our bios. Oh, we just opened our Ko-fi shop, which is like a site to support creators. So we have some of our like custom video commissions. I also recently put one for custom poetry.
Oh,
So
cool.
people can commission poems from me, and I'll write them upon request. So yeah, so those are some of the ways.
Awesome. I won't be tagging any of those, only your cameos, and specifically for strange requests. So that's the only link I'm tagging on this podcast episode.
Sounds fun.
But in all seriousness, thank you both for being on the podcast. And Sam, I know you're more on social media, so this isn't a tag, or I'm not like subtweeting Aussie on this one, but thank you for your comment on one of our recent Instagram reels. I appreciate the support. I encourage all of our listeners and all of our supporters to follow both of you, both Sam and Aussie, in your shared account. Everything will be tagged. I'm totally kidding. But yeah, thank you both so much for your time, and hopefully we'll be able to talk soon.
Absolutely.
Matthew.
Thank you.
Thanks
This
very
was so much
much.
fun.
It was.
Good. Thank you again to Sam and Aussie for joining me on the podcast and discussing their separate mental health journeys and how their mental health journeys go hand in hand with one another, and their experiences on the Ultimatum. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely a watch. So I'll say that much. So yeah, thank you to both of them. And if you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to our show for episodes that release every other Tuesday, and give us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. If you would like to support our podcast and help us grow, you can do so with a donation to the link at the bottom of the episode description. To hear more about Changing Tides, follow us on Instagram at LTSC_Changing Tides, or check out our website, thechangingtides.org. Let's continue to change the tide on mental health.
Yeah.